Okay. We're talking today with William Wall of Bridgman, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
21124 in Hope, Michigan.
All right. Now, what part of Michigan is that in?
Well, in Midland County,
Okay.
north of Midland, just a little way.
All right. So Lower Peninsula, but Lansing.
Pardon?
So I'm just understanding.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, did you grow up there, or did you move around?
Well, no, I grew up in Midland, but Hope was a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And my folks lived in Midland, and then they moved to the farm, and then they moved back to Midland.
Okay.
But the farm is still in the family.
Okay. And why were you moving back and forth? Did your father
Well,
change jobs, or?
yeah, my grandparents bought 120 acres in Hope,
Mm-hmm.
with a barn and a home, and my mother and father went there to live and farm.
Okay.
And my dad found out he was not a farmer. He scratched out a living, but that was about all. And then I don't know the date, but Dow Chemical Company was starting up.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Midland to get a job, and they hired him, and so we went to Midland to live.
Okay. All right. And then did you go to high school in Midland?
Yes,
Okay.
yep,
And did you graduate from high school?
yes.
Okay. I guess before that, though, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
No,
Okay.
I really don't. I don't.
Okay. I just asked that. Most people do, but not everyone. Okay.
Yeah, I suppose so.
On the other hand, once that does happen, I mean, how did the start of the war affect the community or your school or anything like that?
Well, I guess I don't.
Well, were a lot of people now going off to enlist in the military, or?
Well, yeah, my brother went, he enlisted, but my next door neighbor, my folks, was on the draft board
Mm-hmm.
in Midland. And I wanted to enlist, but he come over and talked to my dad, and I was there. And he said, "Jim, don't let him enlist." He said, "I need a quota, and I want him on the quota." So it was a case of he needed bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and I was one of them. So I just waited for them to draft me.
Okay.
Which was
All right. And so when did you get drafted?
when?
Yeah.
Well, in August. I don't know the date. I know the month. It's
Okay.
August.
So that's August of '43?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're, at that point, so you're now, so by then you're 19?
Yep.
Okay, when that happened. So, and then when had you graduated from high school?
43.
Okay, so it's only just a couple of months there between finishing high school and going.
2 months, yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, and then when you're drafted, what branch of the service do they put you in?
Navy.
Okay, and where do they send you for your training?
Chicago.
Okay, to Great Lakes or?
Yeah, Great Lakes, yeah.
Okay, so north of the city itself, but
Yeah.
up in the lake. Okay, and what was Navy boot camp like?
I really don't. Well, 100 guys there, you know,
Mhm.
and it was only just, what, a couple months. And we were gone, and we didn't learn anything, it was just existing, you know, and getting the uniform to fit.
All right. Well, did they have you do marching and?
Oh,
That kind of thing?
yeah, yeah, we did march, yeah. But that would be about the only thing.
All right. Well, let's see. The Navy, did they teach you how to tie knots?
Pardon?
Did they teach you how to tie knots?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's there. All right. Did they teach you firefighting? Did they teach you to do firefighting or put you in a room full of smoke or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yes, they gave us a gas mask and had us go through a room that had something in it that tear gas.
Sure, yes, yeah.
And I do remember that because the guy in front of me that used the gas mask that I used got the stuff inside of it, and when I put it on, it was just
So they had you
terrible.
So you were sharing gas masks?
Oh yeah, take it off and hand it to the guy.
Okay. So, all right. Kind of a strange drill there. Okay. Now, and how hard or easy was it for you to adjust to life in the military?
No problem at all. In fact, my dad was worried about me because I was fairly young, and he came down to Great Lakes to see me, and spent maybe 2 or 3 hours with me, and then come back home and told my mother that don't worry about him. He's got it. And he's okay. Well,
Okay. But still, it's a pretty short time. You're only there a couple of months, and then
Yeah,
they send
yeah.
you. So where do you go next?
San Clemente Island. I took a train and 100 other guys, and we went to San Diego, and
Do you remember anything about the train ride?
yeah,
What was that like?
yeah, it was crowded, and they would stop real often to get water, and usually in a town, you know, and of course all the town people would come out because all the servicemen were hanging out the window, you know, and putting their name and address on a piece of paper, handing it out. And I didn't do that.
Okay. Were you able to get off the train at all?
Yeah. Well, you got off, but they kept pretty close tab on you. You didn't get very far away, you know. But they would let you off and walk around a little bit, and then they'd round you back up.
Now, and did you get any sleep on the train?
Yeah, we must have. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But you didn't have Pullman cars or anything like that. You were just in the regular seats.
Well, those seats would fold down, but then there'd only be room for 2. But if there was up, there was room for 4.
Right.
So they were up.
Okay. Yeah. So
You slept sitting in the chair. Yep.
Right. Okay. And about how long did the train trip take?
You know, that's something I have no idea, because they didn't go straight. They went north, and of course, everybody was wondering where we were going. And you'd wake up in the morning and the sun would be on one side of the train, wake up the next morning and be on the other side of the train. So we were going zigzag all the way out. And of course, when we got to the mountains, I pretty well figured it out that you were going to the west coast.
Okay. So where is San Clemente Island?
That's 70 miles off the coast of San Diego, just south of Catalina.
Okay.
Catalina is known because it was a resort, you know, and there were people there year-round, but San Clemente was a naval base and an air base, and strictly military. They owned the whole thing.
Okay. So there's no town there. There's no civilians.
Nothing. Just sailors
Okay.
and Marines.
All right. So when you got there, then what kind of facilities did you have? Where were you sleeping?
Oh, they had a base built. There were barracks and I'll call it an entertainment center, and a galley, and showers and toilets. It was pretty well put together,
Okay.
and a BLQ, and it was ready. In fact, it had some houses on it. Some they had 2 or 3 for the officers that had wives. And then those that didn't have lived in the BLQ.
BLQ, and what does that stand for?
Bachelor officer quarters.
Okay. All right. But you're just an enlisted man, so you're just in regular barracks?
Yeah, just regular barracks.
Okay. All right. Now, what was your job there?
Well, when I first got there, I was just a seaman. I sweep the floor,
Okay.
wash the windows. But then they found out I was knew carpenter work and knew how to turn a table saw on and off. You can go to the carpenter shop. So, and then I had a fellow that I went to school with and graduated. He was there with me too, and he was a finished carpenter. And of course, he recommended that I get into the carpenter shop and
All right. So what does a carpenter on a naval base do?
well, repair windows, screens, build whatever they needed. But the big job was making picture frames.
Okay.
Believe it or not. Every officer there wanted a picture frame. And of course the island had a lot of abalone. And the abalone, the shell is real pretty on the inside.
Yeah, it's like a mother of pearl kind of thing.
Yeah, and we would, well, that's another, I was on the lobster crew, and they used abalone for bait for the lobsters. Well, the lobsters would eat the bait, and of course there'd be that shell, and I would bring it back to the carpenter shop, and then they would cut that in strips and inlay it into a piece of wood, and then sand it smooth, and that would make a picture frame.
Okay.
Real pretty.
Yeah.
They were real, and of course, every officer there wanted you to make 1, 2, 3. Can you make me another one? Sure. But that was, and one other thing, we made suitcases. Suitcase out of plywood.
Okay.
Which they were nice. They were pretty and they finished nice, and if you didn't, well, you had a sea bag or something to go when you went shore, and that didn't cut it. So
So you had a wooden suitcase instead.
we made a lot of suitcases. Yep. The guys would go ashore and buy hinges, and then little caps go on the corners, and bring them back in a little bag and say, "Make me a suitcase."
All right. So what was the main function of the naval base there? I mean, what was going on there?
Well, several. One thing was that the Navy used it for bombardment. The island is 27 miles long and 4 miles wide, and the south end of it was nothing. But the Navy would drop off some whatever workers, unbeknownst to us. They didn't go through us or go near us, but they would build bunkers like what the Japanese had. There would be replicas of what they had, and then those boys with the big guns would be out of sight, but you could hear them, and they would shell those bunkers, trying to see what damage they could do to them from what distance and whether they could hit them or not. that was one thing. The other thing was that we had a real good rifle range. In fact, it was a Ranger base at one time. And the rifle range was excellent. And of course, the Navy still wanted to use it. So they would, and the dock wasn't deep enough for any large ship.
Mhm.
So they would anchor out and bring in the crew, a few at a time. And we would take them up to the rifle range and they would practice shooting. And they had real nice targets, pull down, back up. You could just, it was state of the art at the time. And
Okay. And then there was also an Air Force base there, or Army Air Forces? Or?
there was an Air Force base there, but I think they had maybe 2 or 3 or 4 airplanes. It wasn't anything, it was just, I'm assuming, just in case Japanese would get that far.
Well, did they have patrol planes, or were they fighters, or do you not know what they were?
Well, they had 2 PBYs
Yeah, so those
that I knew of, and then the other 2 or 3, I don't know what they were. I don't remember, but I do remember the PBYs because we would, our Liberty crew, it took all day to go from San Clemente Island to San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could catch an airplane, so occasionally while we'd catch a PBY and they'd be going into San Diego or one of the ports, and I caught them a few times, you know.
So how often could you actually get back to the mainland?
Every 2 weeks.
Right.
Every 2 weeks we had 5 days off. Now give or take, that doesn't come out right, but we would, we had, I don't know, 3 or 4 different Liberty groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was always one group on shore. And they would be come back on an old destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so old, they call it Moosehead was the name of it. It was IX-98. And they put the IX on there because it was decommissioned a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, we rode back and forth, and it took most of the day to get back and forth. And then they brought supplies, water for the crew, or you know, for us, or some supply.
Now, did the island not have fresh water?
No, they had water. They had and of course it had a steep shoreline. This it was like a mountain.
Yeah.
And they had built a cement pad. And then at the downside of it, they had a drain, and then it drained into a home-in cistern, you know. It was cement blocks built into the ground, and that would drain in there, and that water was used for showers or whatever, but the drinking water came from San Diego on a ship, and they'd take them all day to pump it. That was that, but after maybe I was there a short period of time, don't know just how long, they had some new sailors coming, but they didn't talk to us.
Okay.
They were by themselves, they had their own barracks, they did eat with us, but like a group, they all sat by themselves, you know, and young kid, I didn't think anything of it, you know. And even at the time, they had a thing on the roof that kept turning. I didn't think anything of it. Nobody did, you know. What the hell are they trying to do, you know? Well, it was radar in the infancy. You know. They had started, and of course, an ideal place, because they didn't have any communications, you know, no workers coming in and spying on them or anything. It was really an ideal set. You know? So.
Yeah. Well, by this time, we were using a lot of radar. I mean, it was on naval ships and it was used to defend air bases. But still, it's a logical place for a radar station, and this may have been a fairly advanced one.
It was what?
It may have been an advanced technology because we'd had radar for a while already.
Yeah.
By the time you were in the Navy.
Yeah.
But they're expanding it and they're using more.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming that it just started because the building was already there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where else, you know, a private place like that where nobody they could have that thing whirling and nobody would wonder what it was, you know, other than the sailors, and they didn't, I suppose they didn't talk. You know.
All right. But they're not talking to you, they're not telling you about what they're doing?
No.
Okay.
No, and those sailors that were in that program, they didn't talk to us very much either, you know. It was kind of off by itself and just.
Okay. Now, how much information did you have about how the rest of the war was going? I mean, you're in your own little world on this island here.
Oh yeah, but every 2 weeks we went shore.
Right.
And in 5 days you could drink a lot of booze and you could chase a lot of women, and if you're lucky, you could find your way back.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you stay, when you went ashore, did you stay on one of the naval bases in San Diego? Or you just turned loose?
No. First thing you done was jump on a train.
Okay.
Go head for LA.
All right.
And train rides were free. You just jump on and go.
Mm-hmm.
When you wanted, if you got where you wanted to go, you jump off. You didn't have to ask anybody or pay anybody, or it was just on and off.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Free ride.
All right. So there was more to do in LA than there was in San Diego?
Pardon?
There was more to do in LA than in San Diego?
Oh, yeah, the competition in San Diego, you know, there was 100,000 sailors there.
Okay.
With all the ships coming in there and docking, you know, one aircraft carrier docked there, and you know how many sailors come off that. So, yeah, we didn't even slow down. Just got off the ship and catch the first ride north. So
what would you do in LA?
Now that's a silly question to ask a sailor.
There are different answers.
Yeah. Well, we chased a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them. Catch a few and catch it, and some you didn't. You know? But it was. You usually you'd get a hotel room with 4 guys. You know, 2 beds, 4 guys, and back then, hotel room was maybe $10. You know, for the 2 or 3 days, you know, it was real inexpensive. And we didn't stay in the best hotels either, you know. You went for the low end.
And you spent a lot of time somewhere else.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Now, when you were there, I mean, you know, there were famous places in there and stuff for servicemen, and Hollywood Canteen and things like that. Did you go to any of those, or just?
Yeah, I tried. Several times I tried to go to that Hollywood canteen, but there was always so many people there, so many sailors, you know, soldiers, you know, you'd stand outside and wait to get in, and I guess we got in once, and it was elbow to elbow, and that wasn't fun, so we left, and I never went back. I just gave that up as a bad deal.
All right. Now, out on the island, what kind of entertainment did they have for you?
Well, I was kind of a businessman, you might say, in my youth. They had a bowling alley with 4 lanes, and I ran that. Then they had a lobster crew. The Admiral, the 11th Naval District, liked lobsters. And he sent out a boat and wanted us to catch some lobsters. And of course that island had a lot of lobsters on it. They were just all over the place. And depending on the weather, of course, carpenter shop, we made the traps. If the weather was good, we got a lot of lobsters. But if the weather was bad, we caught hell. Because the Admiral would be right on the radio, wanting to know where his lobsters were, you know. And they'd try to explain to him that the weather's been bad. But he didn't buy that. He wanted lobsters. So, and he paid a whopping $1.50 a dozen. Of course, it was his boat, his gas, and really his time. So it wasn't so bad.
Right. Now, would you go out on the lobster boat, or did you just make the traps?
No, we went out on the lobster. Yeah, we had to go out at, I think, 5 o'clock in the morning. Because of course we had to get back and eat breakfast and stand muster and do our normal work. That was, this lobster deal was after work, you know. But it paid good. I don't remember how many were on it, but we had to have 2 crews because of this Liberty deal. And then we had a cook, and he'd boil the lobster, so he had to get in on them. And then of course...
so you didn't have a lobster tank where you would keep them for a while?
Nope.
No, they just cook them right away. Okay.
Yeah, we'd bring the lobsters in and give them to him, and he'd boil them, and I suppose they'd fly them to San Diego. I don't know.
Right. So the Admiral's not there on the island with you.
No,
he's back in San Diego.
Yeah, he's in San Diego. He's got some friends back there that like lobsters. So we gotta feed them, you know. The radio would just bounce and the weather was bad, you know, and they'd try to explain to him that just the 5-foot, 6-foot waves out there, you know. And, well, can't you go to the other side of the island? You know? That doesn't work.
So, did you get to keep any of the lobsters for yourself?
Yeah. Yep. We had a little electric burner in the wood shop, and a pot, and we'd take out some small ones, and somebody'd go down to the galley and get a loaf of bread. We'd have lobster sandwiches, and they were good. A little butter and a bunch. They went down pretty easy, you know.
All right. Now, out on the island, I mean, did they have a movie theater out there?
Yeah, well.
Or a place where they show movies?
They had a room.
Yeah.
Yeah, they showed movies, and then the bowling alley, and and then they had a bar. They sold beer, but of course I was too young, I couldn't participate in that. But the bowling alley was 4 lanes, and that was down in the basement of where the theater was.
Mhm.
It was pretty well built, pretty well managed, I would say. And they had paved streets and curb and you know.
All right. Okay. Now, you're in the military at a point when it's still segregated. Were there any black sailors there in the island at all, or?
Yeah,
And what did they do?
cooks.
Mhm.
They were, in fact, the one that boiled our lobsters was black.
Okay.
But they were all in the BOQ, all of them.
Mhm. So they're really just there as stewards or people to look after the officers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
We had one guy from Texas there, and I don't know why they moved some of those black sailors into the barracks he was sleeping in.
Mhm.
And he was hot. He didn't want that. In fact, he took his hammock outside, and of course they had places for the hammock,
Mhm.
you know. And he tied his hammock out there and slept out there for a couple nights until they decided that they would do something different. They had extra barracks,
Mhm.
but they, for some reason, wanted to irritate him, I guess. I don't know. He was a nice enough guy, but
Mhm.
he was an awful good poker player and a good crap shooter. There was a lot of that going on payday.
All right. Now, were you perfectly happy to have this job, or did you think you ought to be in the real war?
I was a happy sailor. In fact, my name come up 3 times for transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And each time somebody else would want to go. And it was kind of funny because they'd come down to me and say, "Is it okay if I go down and see if I can take your place?" Have at it, I'll love you. Because I was happy, you know.
So were there a lot of men who got reassigned and went other places? I mean, so you show up on the island, I guess late in '43, and then you're there for the rest of the war. Were there a lot of guys who transferred out, or just a few?
Oh, transfer off the island?
Yeah.
Oh, they'd come and go. Not a lot, but there was, in fact, one of the guys that come to me and wanted to take my place, and in fact, I think it was the last one. I certainly told him I would tickle to death to let him go do his thing. He wound up on the same ship as my brother.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of different, you know.
All right. Now, let's see. You're finished at the rank of carpenter 3rd class. Now, do the ranks? How do they count? I mean, is 3rd higher than 2nd, or is it the other way around?
No. 3rd class. Well, 1st class is highest.
Okay.
Yeah, there was 3rd, 2nd, and 1st.
Okay.
1st class had 3 stripes. 2nd class had 2.
So you're still on the low. You're basically private.
I was low man, so I did take the exam for 2nd class,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sure I passed it. I didn't have any doubt in my mind. But the chief, petty officer that ran the carpenter shop, had a friend in the carpenter shop,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a 3rd class too, the 2 of us. And there was an opening for 2nd class, so we both wrote the exam.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sure I passed it, but you never know, you know. anyway, orders come in for William Wall to do 30-day transfer to San Diego. 30 days in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, I'll go, you know. I packed up and they took me to San Diego and I spent 30 days doing absolutely nothing. I come back, the other guy made second class while I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I just figured the chief wanted me out of there while he made the next train, which that was what he wanted. And, I really wasn't. I was such a good poker player that the little bit that they were giving me didn't make a bit of difference to me. I was just extremely good poker player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're having a perfectly good time, and the rest of it didn't matter.
I had a ball. I did have some times when things were a little hairy, but as it went, I really had a good time.
All right. Well, you say things get hairy. What kind of things happened that were?
Well, we had to take these sailors from ground level up to that rifle range.
Mm-hmm.
They had trucks with seats and bunk seats. They had benches.
Mm-hmm.
And when they'd come, of course, they didn't have truck drivers sitting there waiting for them. You know, they'd say, "Can you drive a truck?" "Yeah, we can drive a truck." "Take that load of sailors up there." Okay, take them up there, you know. Well, anyway, coming back, and these island was like this, and I was coming up one of those, and I started to roll backwards, and I jumped on the brakes, and I just couldn't figure out why it wouldn't go forward. I couldn't do nothing with it, you know. And of course it was empty. I didn't have any sailors home. But I eased off the brake and I backed all the way down, which really wasn't that far, but it was far enough. And I got down to the valley, and I got out and looked, and the drive shaft, the U-joint broke. And the drive shaft just lay there, you know. And right over the edge was a 2,500-foot drop-off. You know? That was probably my scariest moment, but it was as time went, it was good. I enjoyed it. I was just made a lot of friends and.
Okay. Now, you're there, and eventually the war itself comes to an end in the middle of '45. Now, did that change things on the base?
What?
Once the war ended, once the Japanese surrendered?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, it changed the conversation, that's for sure,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Because everybody's talking about going home. And
Right.
When they when it first ended, we didn't have enough points. We were considered in the stateside.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, they decided that we were far enough out that we didn't get sea pay because we were too close to shore.
Right.
Although we were 70 miles off the coast, we still didn't get sea pay. But they decided that they would give us points for sea, which gave me enough to travel, you know. And then the chief, he wanted me to stay, and I didn't want to stay, but he said, "Well, I'll give you a next rank up, you know." I think if he had said 2, I'd have probably stayed, but for 1, that wasn't enough.
Okay. All right. So when do you leave the island then?
Well, must have been in February, as I came right straight home.
Okay. November 1946 then. 1946.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I I made a couple mistakes. My eardrums. While I was on that island, this one busted. Perforated eardrum. And boy, that's painful. And a young kid, you know, I can't go to my mother or anything. You know, you're on your own, Paul. It was just painful. And I was in sick bay for about a week. And then it came back. I got so I could hear her. And then when I got discharged, I was in Chicago. And the guy come out and was talking to us about being discharged, you know. And he said, now if you guys got anything that isn't right, now's the time. You can go out to this door and they'll look at you and write you up and what do they have, you know, for disability or something. I should have got up and gone, but I was so close to getting home. Nah, I can hear, you know, but then after the years get going, it was a mistake. But it wasn't earth-shaking, it was just a little setback.
Yeah. Well, what had happened to your ear? I mean,
I don't know. It just busted one night, and of course we had some real large saws in the carpenter shop. Not that we needed them. We didn't need them, but here's this island, and the Navy would say, well, we got so much, a piece of equipment, in this case a saw, and if you want it you can have it, you know. Well, of course the chief in charge said, oh, we'll take that, you know. And it was a monster. It was probably made to cut 12, 14-inch logs, you know. They used to use those to shore up a ship when they would put it in dry dock. And they'd hammer them in with a sledgehammer. Well, it had a blade on it, just huge. And we never used it, but it was set in there. But they would start it up every once in a while, and it just screamed. And as I look back on it, at the time it didn't bother me. I'm a 19-year-old kid, you can't hurt this guy, you know. But I think it did. And it took 40 years to show up.
right. Okay. All right. So now, once you got out of the Navy, what did you do?
Well, I'd always liked retailing. And of course, when I was in the Navy, I ran like a business, you know. I kept busy and I enjoyed that. And my uncle owned a hardware store, but he had a full crew, you know. So I went to work for another hardware store, and then he decides that maybe he'd like to retire. And so I bought it. I ran that for maybe 10 years. But in the process, Sears Roebuck moved into town. And of course, they sponged up a lot of trade, you know. And the business just, not fast, but you could just see it was tailing off a little bit. And at the time I went into, I took on outboard motors to sell, and boats. And that was really growing. I rented I rented a garage, a used car lot, not a used car, a new car dealership had moved.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman had the building, and it was just right for me. Had parking, had big doors,
Mm-hmm.
just everything was just right, so I rented that from her. And then one day a guy come in and wanted to buy it from him. I'm being good businessman. Anything I got for sale, as long as I can make some money. And I sold it to him. And then, I went home and told my wife I sold it. And she had a fit because I was unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
But then a friend of mine called me up and wanted to know if I would be interested in selling cars. So then I went in the car business. And that lasted for a long time. When I decided to quit work altogether, I was still playing in the car business.
Mm-hmm.
Not real heavy, but I had my finger in it, Once you get that bug, you can't quit.
Okay.
It's just, it's in the blood veins,
All right. Now, when you look back at the time that you spent in the Navy, what do you think you took out of that, or how did that affect you?
What?
How did being in the Navy affect you? Did you learn anything from it, or grow up at all?
Oh boy. Yeah, oh yeah. Yes. I learned how to chase women. I do remember that. And out in LA there was a lot of them to chase. But it was fun. It was, and then there was some hairy times too. I got hooked up with some guys from the island, and I thought I knew them,
Mm-hmm.
and I stayed with them in the hotel, and they were different. That only took me one trip, the next time I was busy,
Mm-hmm.
I steered clear of them, but those are the things you learn, and you learn by your mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and you just got to be careful. That. But as a whole, I enjoyed myself. I had some pretty good buddies, and we stuck together pretty good, and knew right from wrong, and you like women, and one under her arm and go someplace. And it was a time that I grew up and enjoyed it.
All right. Well, it makes for a pretty good story and an unusual story. So.
Well, yeah, there was no gun shows.
Yeah.
No big guns going off, and all of those bunkers those guys were firing on that was and then of course, as they would fire on that island would, in a certain part of the year, would be real dry,
Mm-hmm.
and they would do grass fires. And I don't care whether you're a first-class bowman or a third-class sweeper. You got a broom,
Mm-hmm.
and you went out and you brushed the fire. It was all just a little grass, but it still had to be put out,
So you were getting brush fires even on your end of the island?
Oh yeah. Well, those ships would practice incendiary bombs.
Oh.
They'd go off up above, and scatter that hot stuff, and of course it would burn, and they would know that they were going to do it, and they would have the trucks ready, loaded with brooms
Mm-hmm.
and some water, and you dip that broom with a rag on it in the water, and then you go and drag it on that grass and put out the fire. Really a hot way to do it.
Yeah.
That was,
So that was your.
that was technology at its best.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.